Hey guys, welcome back. So today we are doing a fun little challenge video, or like a little Mythbusters-esque test to see over the course of 1,000 miles if the ambulance that I just bought or my van that I've already had gets better fuel economy, miles per gallon, gas mileage, whatever we want to call it. Now, if you guys are new to this channel or this is the first time you're watching me, I have traveled in tons of different rigs, from SUVs to towing campers to towing to pop-ups to now the van, now an ambulance. I've kind of been all over the place. I even had a Class C before I even started my channel. So I have been through the range of gas mileage and fuel economy this entire time I've been on the road. I will say, never once in the time I have been on the road over the almost 5 years that I've been out here, have I ever spent more money on fuel than I would have spending on rent or even a mortgage payment. I buy all my rigs in cash. I don't have any car payments. I don't have any rent. So I don't budget my gas or fuel budget at all, because the entire point of being on the road is being able to travel whenever you want. So I cut and scrimp and just work my little booty off other places so I have enough money to travel, but I don't budget this. I knew my van wasn't getting great fuel economy, but it wasn't terrible. And the ambulance, when we first drove it, felt better than the van. So we decided, and I'm talking we, me and my boyfriend. He's the one that helped me drive both vehicles back, because obviously I am one person. It's very hard to get a vehicle that you've purchased on the road back to somewhere where you can work on it. So we decided to, just for fun, see what the ambulance was doing before we did any work to it. So here's the disclaimer portion of the video. 1, I'm not a professional. I am not like a scientist. I tried my best to make this as comparable as possible, but there's human error, I'm sure, involved. Everything's not perfect. We were just doing this kind of on a whim. Number 2, we only tested each vehicle off of its own odometer. So my van has oversized tires on it. So you'll see when I start getting into the numbers that the van and the ambulance seem to constantly be driving different mileages, or we made sure each vehicle did over 1,000 miles. We tried to stick together as much as humanly possible, so we were going about the same speed and about the same route. Obviously, we are human again, and if one person got ahead of each other or had to pull over to go to the bathroom or something like that, there is going to be a tiny little bit of discrepancy in there. Also, we have done absolutely nothing mechanical to the ambulance since we bought it. So we have not changed any air filters. We've not changed fluids. We've not done an oil change. We haven't even gotten new tires on it. And to be honest, couldn't even fill the air up properly on them yet, because we need valve extensions for the dualies. We took it to 2 discount tires, but we did not have the ability ourselves to be able to air up the tires, even after exhausting every option to try to find valve extensions on the road. So I do have an appointment to get new tires and do all of that stuff and have them install the extensions for us. But this is just the ambulance versus the van. Ambulance not tweaked to perfection, and the van pretty much as good as it's gonna get. The only thing about the van that would make it different from like standard is I do carry my boyfriend's motorcycle on the back of the van on a like rack. So the van is a little heavier technically in the back, but you guys have seen my build. I don't carry a lot of stuff with me. So the van is an E350. It's not bothered at all by that little bit of weight in the back. What it is bothered by is wind, and it is very susceptible to varying gas mileages because of the wind, and you will see that. So let's just get into the numbers. I have my little notebook here. We started our journey for the 1,000 miles about 40 miles south of Bemidji, Minnesota. We were in a very random place. So the van started at 223,987.9 miles. The ambulance started at 89,831.9 miles, and that is where we stopped first to get gas, to reset both of the odometers, fill them both up completely full so we could get a good read. We then drove from that little tiny town south of Bemidji into Bemidji, back through that little town, and then on our way west to Watertown, South Dakota, which was our first fuel up. Now, let me tell you, when we were driving through eastern Minnesota into a little bit like near Fargo and then south to Watertown, it was so windy. I had quite the headwind, even drafting off of the back of the ambulance. I drove the first 2 legs in the van and then we switched, to try to make it things even. And it was so windy. So at our first fuel up in Watertown, South Dakota, the van then traveled 304 miles, and then the ambulance said it tracked 318.4 miles. The van took 25.166 gallons of gas at $77.74, and the ambulance took 25.255 of diesel, and that was at $88.37. That gives the van an average miles per gallon of 12.08. The ambulance, on the other hand, got 12.61 miles per gallon. So in the first leg, with all that wind, the ambulance actually got better fuel economy than the van, which I was not surprised about. Neither was the boyfriend, but you guys might be. So from Watertown, we spent the night at a Walmart. So we made our way further south and we went to Murdo, South Dakota, which if you guys don't know where that is, it's off of 90. And it's about an hour outside of Wall. So you guys can get the general kind of direction that we're going in. But that second fuel up, the van traveled 261.6 miles. The ambulance traveled 275.2 miles. The van took 18.004 gallons of gas at $52.19. The ambulance took 21.766 gallons of diesel at $69.63. After our second stop, the van got 14.53 miles per gallon, so we did a lot better in the van that day. It wasn't so windy. And the ambulance then got 12.64 miles per gallon. So it was actually pretty consistent, whether it's windy or not. After we left Murdo, we spent the night in Wall. We had a nice couple days off. Actually, we didn't go anywhere. We just kind of hung out in Wall because you guys know it's one of my favorite places. Traveled through Hot Springs, South Dakota. So we fueled up there. And the van traveled 196.3 miles. The ambulance traveled 201.2 miles. During this fuel up, the van took 15.751 gallons of gas at $48.81. And the ambulance took 16.656 gallons of diesel at $57.45. So for this leg of the trip, the van got 12.91 miles per gallon, and the ambulance got 12.08 miles per gallon, which is the lowest it had gotten all trip. And I think it was because I was driving it during this leg, and I was still learning how to post and do all the things in a new vehicle. We are actually nearing the end of the trip. We only did 4 fuel stops in our 1,000-mile journey. And so our last fuel stop was in Buford, Wyoming. We went through Cheyenne, picked up a bunch of insulation and construction stuff for the ambulance just in case I decide to take it with me this winter. And so our 4th fuel up was in Buford, Wyoming, which is off of 80. The van had traveled its last 252.9 miles. The ambulance traveled 266.9 miles. The van at this stop took 17.053 gallons of gas at $47.88. The ambulance took 20.14 gallons of diesel at $60.22. So the last leg, we got the best fuel economy for both vehicles. The van was at 14.83 and the ambulance was at 13.25. So, drumroll please, our last check-in for the running total for the entire 1,000 miles that we took this trip. The van traveled 1,021.8 miles. It took 75.974 gallons of gas, which brought the average miles per gallon to 13.45. And a total spent on gas for that trip was $226.62. The ambulance traveled a total of 1,061.7 miles. It took 83.817 gallons of diesel. The average miles per gallon for the entire 1,000 miles was 12.67. And the total cost spent on fuel for the ambulance was $275.67. So after a tiny bit over 1,000-mile trip, the van was better in fuel economy by less than 1 mile per gallon. The total difference in fuel was about $50 for the whole trip. Obviously, diesel costs more than gas most of the time, but I'm pretty sure after we do all of the tweaking to the ambulance, we're gonna get about the same fuel economy. It's negligible difference between the van and the ambulance. And while $50 may break the bank for some people, for me personally right now in my life, I don't have an issue with it, especially because I rarely do 1,000-mile trips in very short periods like that. Even if I was driving 2,000 plus miles a month, that's really only like $500 to $800 in fuel. And that is still not going to get me an apartment, and I still don't have a car payment, and I still don't have to live in one place. So I think for how this result came out and putting the little bit of money into tires and changing all the fluids, obviously just for the health of the vehicle, and the ability to stand up in the back, I am probably going to lean towards taking the ambulance with me this winter, because it is just not that big of a difference to where I can justify staying in the van without being able to stand up and have the extra space. I also feel much safer on the road in the ambulance. The dualies make things much more stable on the road, especially in the wind. The heavier weight on the back roads and washboards are way less exhausting to drive on. So I think at the end of all of this, it's going to pretty well solidify my idea that I was going to take the ambulance with me this winter. The fact that it did like almost 1,500 miles and we have had 0 mechanical issues with it, I think it's pretty well good to go once we give it a little tune-up, and I am not worried about taking it with me at all. So let me know in the comments below if this surprised you, if you would take the ambulance versus the van. I'm going to be honest, I'm pretty excited to be able to stand up, especially if it's like they say, where it's going to be very windy and rainy all winter down in the desert. I need somewhere to like stretch out and go. The van feels a little cramped versus the ambulance now. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little test. I thought it would just be fun to do, and it would be fun to share with you guys as well. And I will see you guys on the next one. Bye!